Today's session is going to be talking about how to manage and improve renewals with Totango. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Cecilia Tavel. I run the customer success programs here at Totango, and I've been here for about 3.5 years and really enjoy working with all of you and sharing best practices. If you want to stay in touch with me, or if you have any direct questions for me after the session, you can just email me. It's cecilia@totango.com, and I'll be happy to stay in touch. So for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about how to forecast renewals in Totango's Revenue Center. We'll talk about setting up renewal processes via success plays. We'll talk about setting up alerts when customers are in poor health prior to renewal, and we can brainstorm on how to define a get well plan. And then also managing and tracking individual and team renewals via some of the areas where you can track that in Totango. So to start, just to start kind of showing you some ideas of areas where renewals come into play on the Totango platform. If your organization already uses us for the financial component of customer success in the Revenue Center, that's great. If you don't, please reach out to us, find out from us how to take advantage of it, because it's a great vehicle and a tool to get everybody on the same page and visualize information and track information, see how you're doing. And each individual CSM can forecast their own accounts, so it gives you a lot of great capabilities. This is a quick screenshot of that capability. I'll also show it to you in a live demo as well when we get to that. The other component is success plays. So it's really operationalizing the process of renewals. So because Totango knows information about your customers, we know some specific dates, like the renewal date. We can start looking at the renewal way up in advance. So typically a 90-day in advance is a good start, maybe 120 days, depending on your specific process. But it's really important to alert the team, to let them know that there's a renewal coming up so that they can do the appropriate work necessary to secure that renewal. So that's another component of Totango that can really help your team get on the same page and standardized across the board. So we'll talk about that. The other part is getting alerts. So you can get alerts when things are maybe not looking great and the renewal is coming up. So you can manage that in segments by defining an appropriate segment. Here we're looking at customers that are paying, their contract renewal date is in the next 90 days and they're in poor health. And the ability that allows you to get alerts on these is the trigger mechanism that is available on all the segments. So basically what you would do is define an email address where you would want an alert to be sent, and what will happen anytime there's a new customer that's entering that 90-day window for renewal and they're not in good health, you can get alerted by that. So then you can just be proactive. You can also execute a process from there, but getting a kind of an email sometimes is something that is important to get you kind of focused in the right place. And we'll give you some examples on that as well. So as far as executing a process, so if a renewal is coming up and the customer is not in great health, then you want to actually strategize internally as a team to figure out how to get through that. What do you need to do with the customer? So that can be a success play. So basically, whenever there's an account that comes into the renewal time frame, they're not in good health, there's going to be a task assigned through success plays to work on that. So, and the specific, instructions for your team can be defined with the success play editor. So we'll talk about that as well. And the next part is really tracking your renewals. So we obviously want to make sure that we know what the renewals are, and then we want to make sure we're tracking and seeing how we're doing. So there's a few places in Totango where you can visualize this information. One of them is going to be your segment, so you can actually see what customers are coming up for renewal. You can summarize it by specific CSM, so you can see by CSM how many accounts they have coming up for renewal, what's that total contract value, and then distribution by health. And there's also areas in the Revenue Center that display the specific stats about renewals, and we'll show you that as well in the demo. And then there's also a distribution. This is also part of the revenue center that gives you a breakdown by the success manager. And this can be a quarterly view, so you can actually see how they're doing by each CSM. You can look at the renewals, you can look at their upsells, churn, etc. So that's a comprehensive view through the revenue center. And then we also have reports. So if you create specific segments, so I have a segment that's looking at the upcoming renewals in the next 90 days, I created a report from that segment. So I can see at any given date how many customers I have that fall into that renewal window. I also broke it down by the success manager. So you can see at any given point how many accounts each success manager has coming up for renewal in the next 90 days. And then I can also see the breakdown by health. So I can see how many customers are in red, for example, yellow or green. So I have 9 that are in the next 90 days that are in red. So it's kind of gives me some visuals to track too. So that's in the reports. And then if we kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of renewal automation, if appropriate, we do want to look at kind of your service model. So do you have a high touch versus low touch? And would the low touch model be, can you set up a renewal process that meets the needs of your low touch customers? Can that be automated somehow? So maybe some sort of self-service renewal process that you can start from the campaigns capabilities in Totango, so you can send really relevant targeted emails that may have a call to action process for renewal. Maybe they click on the link and they just go through the specific process on their own. And if not, maybe you set up the communication piece to be automated, but then you have customers reach out to you, or maybe there's a specific scheduling that you prompt them to go through so that they can, schedule a meeting with you to talk through that component of renewal. So those are just some ideas. So from here, I'm actually going to skip out and go into the demo portion. And if you guys have any questions as we go through this, and if you have had any questions as we were going through the slides, feel free to type them into the question box and we'll take the questions at the end of the session. So now that I'm into Tango, this is my portfolio. If I am managing my financials through the Revenue Center, I would actually have the Revenue Center information here. But if we start talking about the specific forecasting components, and I'm going to click on the Revenue Center to show you some of the examples. If we're looking at Q4, which is where we are right now, I can look at all accounts, or I can look at only my account. So if I'm a CSM, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to look at my accounts. And if I want to start forecasting, the forecasting section is actually up over here. I can, if I haven't done my forecast, I'll go in here, but let's assume that I haven't. I'm going to look at all my customers that are in my Q4. And if I need to, reforecast something, or maybe I need to add a new forecast, I can go through this as an individual CSM and update the information. So for example, if, this one CRV is looking like it's going to churn, but let's say things have improved and I have been able to course correct with that customer, I can actually forecast them to renew. So I can actually update my forecast in here in real time. And I can do the same thing with, maybe this customer. They look like they're going to renew, but I know that there's something going on now. So actually, I'm going to forecast them to churn. So as an individual CSM, this is really great because you have the knowledge about the customer. You can use the Revenue Center to forecast your accounts. There's also another place outside of the Revenue Center. If you're just working with a customer, let's say you have had a conversation just now with them and you're in their account profile, there's also a way to forecast in here. So you can actually do it directly in the account profile as well. So I'm going to go back to the Revenue Center and look at that again. And so these are my accounts. Once I'm done forecasting, I can just say done forecasting, and that will update my specific views. So it will update my forecast. The other thing that's great, and that's for kind of looking at the kind of the statistics, I can take a look and see at, my performance analysis. I can see my renewal rate, net retention rate, etc. And then if I had goals set up by my organization, this is something that gets set up centrally, I could see how I'm tracking against my goals. And that's really great as well, because sometimes you are, a little bit behind or a little bit ahead, but it's good to look at it and check up on it throughout the quarter to see where you stand. And then if I look at breakdowns, I can actually see that breakdown that I showed you earlier. You can actually see it by each specific success manager and how they're doing with their, quarterly situation on the financial front across everything. So this is really neat as well. You can do the forecast. You can look at the quarter to date numbers as well if you're part way into the quarter. So that's the Revenue Center. Again, as I mentioned, if you don't have the Revenue Center, if you're interested in it, please discuss that with your CSM. The other thing that's important before starting to use the Revenue Center, there's a way to define your setup. So you can specify your financial year, your periods, monthly or quarterly, start of the year, which year you're in, and how you want to calculate your churn. So there's a lot of options for you here before diving in. So please explore that if you haven't, and if you do have the Revenue Center, if you haven't set that up, reach out to us if you need any help. So from here, we're going to go into the segments piece. And so in the segments, this is where actually you would define all your logic. So I have a folder that's looking at my renewals. And I have one segment that's just looking at all the renewals that are coming up in the next 90 days. So I have all my customers listed out. And I also exposed some columns. So this is where the column editor is really handy, because I brought in, outside of the general columns that are available to you on any segment, I also exposed the forecast state. So I can see line by line by each customer, what is their forecast state. So what it was that customer forecasted at and who forecasted it. So you can actually see who actually specified that forecast. I can see my forecast amount and my forecast due date. If you ever need to update this information, you can actually click on the columns. You can remove things, you can add things, but you also have the ability to go into the forecast area and specify and bring in the columns that are relevant to you, along with any other data that you'd like to see in the segment. The other part that we talked about is the specific alerts. So the alerts are again managed by the triggers, and the trigger mechanism is available to you here. Basically, you have tags as triggers. In this particular case, we're using email as a trigger. So you're going to get an email, and we have a specific email distribution list that's called renewals at Totango. And so whenever there's a customer that enters renewal phase, there's going to be an email going out to that list. So this is where you can specify that trigger. Also, one important item to note is you need to activate your trigger. So right now the trigger is paused. You actually need to activate it in order to make sure that you will receive that email when a customer enters that renewal period. So that's our renewal segment. The other one that we have is the renewals that are coming up, but they're not in great health. So this is where your team can actually start operationalizing and building a process. So you can also get an alert, and you can also set up a success play. So we're looking at customers that are coming up for renewal in the next 90 days. They're not doing great. We want to start a success play with that. So you can actually launch directly into the success play by clicking on the little play icon. And right away you're launched into this editor, and you already have the specific conditions for your success plays or the filter conditions available, so you don't have to redefine them unless you need to. You can give this a description. I'll just call it test. And now with the success flows, now you have the categorization, so you can actually specify this is a renewal success play. Just review your list of customers just to make sure everything looks right. And click on continue, and here's where you can actually specify the process. So what I'm going to say to the CSM, have an internal review, come up with get well plan. So that's something that you can really make specific and very granular. You can assign it directly to the success manager. You can specify who it's assigned by, give a priority. I'd say high because it's a customer that's approaching renewal. not doing great. I'll give it 3 days to complete, and then I'll continue. And here I have another opportunity to review my success play, and then I can simply activate it. So once I activate it, it will go to my CSMs. They'll get a notification in their My Portfolio Center, and then they'll also get an email letting them know that they have a task assigned. So I'll activate that. I get a little prompt saying that there's going to be 9 customers affected and 9 tasks created. So I can click on continue, and now I have my success play up and running. So that's one way to start the operationalization process with your renewal. It can be, either a positive thing or a negative thing, really depending on, what you'd like to focus on. But really, looking at renewals at the appropriate time frame for your organization and this type of customer you're dealing with is a good idea. So success plays allow you to do that. So if we go back to segments, the other thing I wanted to show you is the, potentially if you're looking to automate some of this via campaigns, which are customer communications that are powered directly through Totango. What you can do is look at maybe customers that are approaching renewal and target your key contacts because they're the decision makers. And if it's a low touch account, if it's appropriate, you can actually build a custom campaign that will allow the customer to renew on their own. So, we can launch directly into the campaign editor, and we can start defining your campaign. This one, again, you can define it via the success flow as a renewal campaign. You can specify the type of campaign it is, or we can just build our own custom campaign. We can continue. We'll review the list. Looks like we don't have anyone here that's coming up for that. So we can't really proceed on this that well, but we'll just go through the prompts here. We're going to skip the goals. And then really this is where you'll customize your message. So you'll have your, relevant subject line, and you will specify kind of the body of the email and what is appropriate. Like, are you going to include a link for someone to renew? Is there something, maybe there's some sort of promotion that you're running for renewal customers that are low touch. Maybe there's something you want to offer them additionally to what they're doing, and maybe leverage that renewal as an upsell opportunity. There's a lot of kind of interesting things you can be doing with that. So that's the campaigns. The other part that I wanted to show you is the part where you can actually look at the reports and start visualizing some of your information for renewals in a report. So I have one that I created. Let me just find it. So I have a report that I showed you earlier. It's upcoming renewals that are, in the next 90 days. And we're looking at trends for the past 30 days. So basically, as I hover over my trend line, I can see on each particular date how many customers I had coming up for renewal in the time frame. So it looks like it's pretty consistent. I also broke it down by health and by success manager. So if I'm looking at this report regularly, I can see, who's coming up for renewal, and they're red. And I actually can click on that breakdown and see who those customers are, at each given point. I can also look at my CSMs and look at their customers, who's coming up for renewal for each CSM. And so it also kind of looks, it gives you the distribution. You can see who has a lot of kind of work up in front of them based on how many customers they have coming up for renewal. So you can look at that breakdown this way. You can also break it down by other components. So anything we're tracking into Tango, any attribute value that is sent to Totango can be used as a component. So I'll show you how to edit this. And right now I only have one segment. Obviously, if you have other segments, you can bring them in here. But right now I just have one. And for components, you can add other components. So if you're looking to add other specific key attributes that are relevant, maybe, the contract value is important. You can bring that in, click on OK, and then that will get added to your report. So it looks like we have a lot of customers coming up for renewal in this $18,000 to $19,000 range, which is our kind of the largest concentration of renewals in the next 90 days. So it's some interesting information that you can start visualizing in reports as well. So with that, I wanted to see, pause for a second, see if anybody has any questions, and we'll take as many questions as we have time for. So we do have a question. So does the forecasting update in the Revenue Center sync back to Salesforce if the integration is set up? So actually, the answer to that is no. So if we're forecasting in Totango, then the forecasting piece stays in Totango, and really, like, everybody can, if you have your users log into Totango, they can look at the Revenue Center both on the overall company side, so you can look at all accounts, and if you're CSM, you can look at just your accounts. But the forecasting will kind of be centralized into Tango, and this component actually would not sync to Salesforce. What we actually do get from Salesforce typically are your demographics, so contract values, renewal dates, things like that would actually feed into Totango so that we can, forecast properly. I hope that answers your question. Okay. And let's see, there's something else. What does defining the success flow actually do? How is it useful? That's a great question. So this is one of our recent additions to Totango. So a success flow, what you would need to do initially in the settings is define or look at the specific success flows that are there. You do want to make sure that you have a default success flow defined. And basically, success flows are ways to categorize your customer success engagements or your interactions. So when you have a conversation with a customer, what type of conversation was it? Were you talking to an executive? Was this an executive type of conversation? Was this a renewal topic? Did you have a QBR? So there's a lot of different options. You actually have an ability to add your own success flow. So if you have other types of interactions, maybe, one that I thought of and I added before was advocacy. Maybe there's some sort of advocacy that you're doing with customers and it's a specific type of interaction or engagement. You can actually give it a name. You can specify an icon for it that's going to be relevant, and you can set it up to see if it's going to be a default. So for us, the default is nurture, because typically no matter what conversation you're having, you're nurturing your customer. So that's an easy one to have as a default, and make sure you do have a default in place. Otherwise, if you add success flows, they will not be recognized, and it'll be harder to track. So start defining your defaults and how it's useful. There's a lot of places where it's useful, as you saw earlier, when you define your success play or when you define your campaign, you can categorize your interaction. When you note a touch point, when you have a conversation with a customer and you note your touch point in the account profile, you can specify what type of interaction that was. You can also specify what type of task you're doing when you're recording or creating a task, like a one-off task. You can specify what type of interaction that will be. So there's a lot of places for it. It really helps organize and see how your team is spending their time, what type of activities are the most consuming. So if you look at the executive console and go into the team section, there's actually a way to look at kind of the distribution of the types of engagements that each CSM has. So let me get this to load. It sometimes takes a little while in the demo. So once it loads, I'll hopefully be able to show you that component really quick. All right, so maybe while we wait for that to load, let me go on to the next question really quick. Okay. So the next question is, can you show again how to create a report? I did not see how you got there. Yeah, so let me show you really quick how to do a report. So this is still loading, so I'm going to just jump out of that. But basically, if you wanted to do this in your own account, if you go to the executive team console, you can hover over each CSM's name, and then you'll see the actual breakdown of that information as far as the specific activities that were performed by the CSM. So to create a report, you actually have to click on create, And you need to add segments. So you have to actually select a specific segment that was created. And then you just grab the segment. So maybe I'll just grab this one, and you can actually specify what color you want it. So you can add it. You can change the color if you need to. And then your segment is added. And from there, this is how you start building a report. And then you can add components. So components is anything that we're tracking into Totango, so engagement metrics. So you can actually, maybe look at health as your engagement metric. And then if I click on attributes, I can look for my success manager. I can find my contract value, and you can start typing things, so it makes it easier for you to select these items really quick. So that's the process of building a report. We also have some resources if you're looking for more specifics or some tips. We have hot tips on Totango's support site. So if you just remember support.totango.com, hot tips have some good examples of reports. And reach out to me, Cecilia@totango.com, if you have any further questions on that. So let me see, we're kind of approaching the end. So let me try to see if I can grab one more question. And then we can, if we need to follow up with you specifically on the rest of the questions, we will. So let me see if there's a quick question that we can do. Okay, so the question is, if we do not have our contract value info integrated into Totango today, is there someone who could help me with the CSV import as a stopgap until we get the integration set up? Yes, that's a great question. So you actually can. So in the settings, there's a part called Integration Hub. And through the Integration Hub, you can load CSV files. So you just need to make sure you provide the appropriate columns and names of the data points that you're trying to get in, and you can get that set up. So if you have specific questions on that, if you're still integrating, you can reach out to your CSM and their support team, and they'll be able to assist you with that. But the Integration Hub is what will get you there. So I do apologize. We just ran out of time. I want to thank everybody for attending. If you have any questions, want to talk to me directly, please reach out. And we'll also follow up with you if we haven't addressed your question on this webinar today. We do hope to see you soon. We'll be announcing the next webinar series shortly, and we hope to see you again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.